We did a lot of work in this section. The last thing we have to consider is the effect of the number of stakeholders or people working on an activity and how that activity changes when we add more people. First of all, we have to understand the concept of people and communication lines. What happens when more people are added to a project or to an activity? We also have to look at how activity duration is influenced by the resources and what is the concept of the crash point. So let's first have a look at people and communication lines. Here you are, the project manager. You're alone at this moment, but there is a new resource that you are working with. Now you have one communication line, one line of communication between you and the person on the computer. We add another person, one of your trainers, and that person adds two communication lines because that person can communicate with you and with the person on the computer. We add another person, and now this person can communicate with the three people that are already available in the project or working on the project, and of course adds again three communication lines. The fifth person adds four communication lines, and so on. When we look at this, the way the communication lines grow, we can find the formula, which is n times n minus 1 divided by 2, where n is the number of people that are able to communicate between each other. Now, what is important to see is that when more and more people are added, the number of communication lines grows exponentially. So the more people you put on a project or the more people you put on an activity, the more communication lines will exist and the more complex the communication becomes. The effect of a complex communication is, of course, a loss of time, but we come back to that a little bit later in this session. We can now use the formula to calculate the number of channels or communication lines. Let's consider a total of 25 people that are working on the project initially. So the number of communication lines is 25 times 25 minus 1 divided by 2, which gives us a total of 300 communication lines. When we add 10 people, so 25 becomes 35, we can calculate the new channels that exist between those people. The same formula, 35 times 35 minus 1 divided by 2, gives us a new total of 595 communication lines. This means that the initial communication lines of 300 increase to 595, which is an addition of 295 channels. What happens if 5 people disappear? So 25 minus 5 gives us 20 people, and the channels are calculated in the same way. 20 times 20 minus 1 divided by 2 is a new total of 190 channels. This means that the channels decrease from 300 to 190, which is a decrease of 110 channels. Now let's have a look at a problem that occurs when we add more and more resources to an activity. We look at the graph, and in the x-axis we have the people who are working on the project, and on the vertical axis we have the duration of a specific task or activity. This is the relation between time and people. When we look at this graph, or when we would look at it closely, we will see that there is a linear part and a non-linear part. In the linear part, the time reduces proportionally to the number of people that are added to the activity. Once we reach the nonlinear zone, adding more people will still decrease the duration of the activity, but the proportionality is not there anymore. Adding more people will increase disturbance, interference between the people, and the efficiency will go down. When we continue adding people, we arrive in a point, that minimum point, which we call the crash point. And we add more resources, we will see that instead of reducing the duration will increase. So at the left-hand side of the crash point, adding resources decreases the duration, but at the right-hand side, the duration increases. Let's consider an example where we have 4 people working on an activity, or 5 people. And we see in this case that the duration of the activity with 4 or 5 people is exactly the same. It means that it's no sense to add 5 people because it will not create any advantage. It will only reduce the efficiency and increase the cost. Now we can conclude that the most economic solution in this case is to work with 4 people. Now let's look at another scenario in the next slide. And we have the same graph, but now we see that our people, or the effect of the people, is a little bit different. We see that the duration with 4 people is moved a little bit to the left, and we see the activity 5, and we see when we add 1 person from 4 to 5, the duration is still reduced. So here, 4 people, we have a certain duration. 5 people, we have a better duration, but the cost will increase. So what's the conclusion in this case? Well, here we have to look at the triple constraint, or the scope triangle. If our project is driven by time, then it would be interesting, or it could be interesting, to add 5 people to the activity. It will cost more, but the work will finish faster. On the other hand, when cost is the driving parameter, we will probably select 4 people because this is the cheaper solution. So, with this slide, we finish all the necessary items related to resources. In the next sessions, we will work with those resources, put them on the planning, create a network diagram, and calculate the duration of the project. So, an exciting section, a lot of new things, a lot of scary things. We did a lot of calculations. I'm sure you learned a lot, and you did a great job. See you in the next session.